Welcome to the first chapter of our chilling story, The Forgotten Room. Tonight, we meet Jacob, a man searching for a fresh start. But sometimes, a new beginning can hide dark secrets. Jacob had just purchased his dream home, a house full of character, charm, and something else, something waiting. But not every house is what it seems. And Jacob? He's about to learn that the hard way. At first, it was everything he dreamed of. High ceilings, creaky wooden floors, and enough space to leave his old life behind. Jacob was ready to start fresh. Every room told a story, but one door remained silent. It was locked, no key in sight, and that's when the unease began to creep in. Jacob told himself it was nothing, just an old house with quirks. But deep down he felt it, that nagging pull, the sense that he wasn't alone. Jacob didn't know it yet, but this door would soon change everything. Because behind it, something was waiting, watching. Will Jacob uncover the truth? Or will the house's dark secrets claim him first? Stay tuned for Chapter 2, where the whispers grow louder and the terror begins. Sometimes the things we can't see are the things that haunt us most. Jacob couldn't shake the feeling. It was just a door, right? But why did it feel alive? Why did it feel like it was waiting for him? He told himself it was his imagination. A new house comes with creaks and groans. But even then, Jacob couldn't stay away for long. Who locks a door in their own house and hides the key? And why? The questions circled in Jacob's mind like shadows he couldn't escape. As Jacob rummages through a box, the sound of a soft knock comes from the locked door. And then, it happened. A knock. Faint, but unmistakable. Jacob freezes, his hands shaking. He looks down the hallway, but the door is still. Jacob laughed nervously. "It's just the wind," he muttered. But deep down he knew. There was no draft, no breeze, just him and the door. Jacob walking cautiously back to the door. He places his hand on the knob and tries it again, but it doesn't budge. Locked, as always, and yet Jacob couldn't shake the feeling that something was on the other side, something waiting for him to open it. A close-up of Jacob's face as he leans in closer to the door. Suddenly, there's a low whisper, too faint to understand but undeniably real. Was it a voice? A trick of his mind? Or the house revealing its secrets, piece by piece? Jacob steps back from the door, shaking his head. He tries to laugh it off, but his eyes betray his fear. The camera lingers on the door as the whispers grow louder and then suddenly stop. Jacob thought he could ignore it, but some doors aren't meant to stay locked forever. In Chapter 3, the whispers grow bolder, and Jacob finds a key that unlocks more than just a door. A stormy night. Rain lashes against the windows of Jacob's house. Inside, he sits at a cluttered desk, staring at an old wooden box he found in the attic earlier that day. In Chapter 2, we watched Jacob grow obsessed with the locked door in his home. But tonight, the house decides to reveal its first secret. A key hidden for decades. A key. Simple. Ordinary. But in the wrong lock, it can open unimaginable horrors. Jacob didn't remember seeing this box when he moved in. It was as if the house wanted him to find it. And that thought alone sent chills down his spine. With the key in hand, Jacob stood before the door. It was just a door, just a key, or so he told himself. But deep down he knew this wasn't ordinary. Jacob inserts the key into the lock. The camera zooms in as he slowly turns it, each click echoing unnaturally loud. And then, the lock gave way. The air felt different, heavy, cold, as if the darkness itself was alive. Jacob switches on a flashlight and steps inside. Dust swirls in the beam of light, and old furniture is draped in tattered white sheets. At first glance, it seemed like any forgotten room. Abandoned furniture, broken trinkets, the smell of decay. But Jacob wasn't alone in the room. The flashlight beam lands on a dusty mirror. In the reflection, something moves, a faint shadow. Jacob spins around, but there's nothing there. Something moved. He was sure of it. But when he looked, the room was empty. Or was it? Jacob approaching an old chest in the corner. He hesitates, then opens it to find faded photographs and letters. One photo shows a family, their faces scratched out, except for a little girl in the center. A family once lived here, but what happened to them? And why had they left this room behind? As Jacob picks up the photograph, the door behind him slams shut with a deafening bang. The flashlight flickers, and a low growl echoes in the darkness. The house wasn't just hiding secrets, it was protecting them, and Jacob had just crossed a line. In Chapter 4, Jacob discovers the truth behind the family in the photograph. But as the whispers grow louder and the shadows closer, will he regret ever opening that door? Jacob sits on the floor of the mysterious room, flashlight flickering in his trembling hand. The photograph of the scratched-out family lies next to him. A shadow shifts in the corner of the room. Jacob looks up, his breath hitching as the growling sound returns, louder this time. But the house wasn't just empty. It was waiting, watching. Jacob frantically pulling at the door, but it doesn't budge. He spins around, the flashlight sweeping the room, landing on the mirror again. This time, the little girl from the photo is standing there, staring back at him. And then, he saw her, the girl from the photograph. But she wasn't just a memory. She was here, now. Close-up of Jacob's face, pale with fear, as the girl's reflection tilts her head unnaturally. Her mouth moves, but no sound comes out. Jacob couldn't hear her, but he felt her words, like ice piercing his chest. She was trying to tell him something. But what? Jacob slowly turning toward the empty corner where the girl appeared in the mirror. She's not there. Was she real, or just a trick of the house? Jacob didn't have time to figure it out because the whispers, they were growing louder. The room begins to shake. Furniture scrapes across the floor, and the growls deepen into guttural roars. Jacob crouches, covering his ears. The house wasn't happy. Jacob had disturbed something that was never meant to be uncovered. Jacob's flashlight lands on the old chest again. The letters inside begin to float, swirling in the air before bursting into flames. From the ashes, a single piece of paper survives. A single letter remained, untouched by the fire. On it, words scrawled in trembling handwriting. She is trapped. Help her. Jacob grabs the letter, staring in confusion and fear. The girl wasn't haunting the house. She was trapped inside it. And Jacob? He was her only hope. The girl's voice echoes through the room, faint but clear. Find the truth, she whispers. Before it's too late. The camera pans to the mirror again. This time, the girl's face twists into something monstrous, her eyes glowing red as she screams. The screen cuts to black. Jacob digs deeper into the house's horrifying history. But the closer he gets to the truth, the stronger the darkness becomes. Will he save the girl, or lose himself to the house forever? A sunrise over the house. Inside, Jacob sits in the living room, surrounded by old papers, the mysterious letter, and the photograph with the scratched-out faces. In Chapter 4, Jacob came face to face with the spirit of a trapped girl. Now, her whispers lead him deeper into the past. A past the house has tried to bury for decades, a flashback of the girl's monstrous scream from the mirror. Jacob jolts awake at his desk, as though haunted even in his sleep. Some homes have history, others have secrets, and Jacob was about to uncover the worst kind. Jacob flipping through newspapers he found in the attic. One headline reads, "Family mysteriously vanishes. Only daughter found dead." A family once lived here, a father, a mother, and their young daughter. But one night they disappeared, all except for her. She was found lifeless in the very room Jacob unlocked. Jacob whispers to himself, why would someone do this? What really happened here? The official report spoke of tragedy, but the whispers in the house told a darker story, a story of betrayal, of revenge, and of something inhuman. Jacob finding a diary among the papers. The name Lillian is written on the cover, the same name as the girl in the photo. Her name was Lillian, a bright, cheerful girl, loved by her parents. But as Jacob read her diary, a new picture began to form. one of fear and despair. A close-up of the diary page. It reads, "The shadows come at night. They speak to Daddy. They tell him to hurt us." The shadows, what were they? And why did they target Lillian's family? Jacob searching the house. He discovers symbols etched into the floorboards beneath the old furniture. Symbols of rituals and summoning. This wasn't just a family tragedy. The house had been cursed. Someone, or something, had brought darkness into this home, and it claimed Lillian's life as payment. As Jacob examines the symbols, the whispers return, louder and more frantic. The camera pans to the hallway, where the locked door creaks open on its own. The house wasn't done with Jacob. It had more to show him, and this time it wasn't asking, it was demanding. Jacob standing frozen, the whispers growing into screams. He stumbles backward, clutching the diary as the walls of the room begin to bleed black tar-like shadows. The house was alive. It was feeding on fear, on memories, on Jacob himself. And if he didn't act fast, he'd be the next soul it claimed. Jacob runs out of the room, the diary clutched tightly in his hand. The door slams shut behind him, and the camera lingers on the black tar seeping under the frame. In Chapter 6, Jacob turns to a local historian for help. But the more he learns about the houses, Jacob sits in a dimly lit library, a stack of old books and newspapers scattered on a wooden table. Across from him sits a frail but sharp-eyed man, the town's historian, Mr. Whitaker. Now, desperate for answers, he turns to the only person who might know the truth, the town historian. Mr. Whitaker leans forward, his voice a whisper. "You should have never unlocked that door." Not exactly comforting words for a man already haunted by shadows. Mr. Whitaker flipping through an old journal, its pages yellowed with age. He points to a sketch of the house, surrounded by cryptic symbols. The house was built over 100 years ago by a reclusive man named Arthur Mallory, a man known for his wealth, his isolation, and his dark obsessions. The symbols around the house match the ones Jacob found etched into the floorboards. Mallory wasn't just a man, he was a summoner. The whispers Jacob heard, they began with him, and they've never stopped. Jacob asks, "Summoner? Of what?" Mr. Whitaker hesitated. Not because he didn't know, but because he feared saying the name aloud. The historian finally speaks, his voice trembling. He summons something older than time, something that feeds on fear, and never lets go. Jacob flipping through a book Whitaker hands him. It's filled with chilling illustrations, figures in shadow, blood rituals, and warnings scrawled in red ink. The house wasn't cursed by accident. Mallory had performed rituals meant to grant him power. But instead, he invited a darkness that consumed him and every family that followed. Lillian's family was just the latest victim. And now, the house had chosen Jacob. Whitaker slams the book shut, leaning closer to Jacob. "You can't just leave. The house won't let you. But there's a way to break the curse. If you're willing to risk it." Jacob's face pale but determined. He asks, "What do I need to do?" Whitaker explained a ritual of reversal, a dangerous process that could banish the darkness forever. But the price was steep, and failure meant more than death. The historian writing down instructions, his hand shaking. He warns, "Do this wrong and you'll join Mallory in the void." Jacob was running out of time. The whispers were growing louder. The shadows were closing in. And the house? It was watching, waiting for his next move. Jacob leaves the library, the historian's instructions in hand. As he steps into the night, a shadow passes over the moon, and a whisper floats on the wind. "You can't win, Jacob." Jacob attempts the reversal ritual. But as the darkness fights back, will he outsmart the house or become its next victim? A thunderstorm rages outside the house. Inside, Jacob clears a space in the mysterious room. He sets up candles, a chalk circle, and a few ancient items outlined in Mr. Whitaker's instructions. Now, with time running out, he's ready to attempt the reversal ritual. But the house, it's ready too. The camera pans to the shadows gathering in the corners of the room, moving unnaturally, as if alive. A low growl echoes through the walls. The The stakes were clear. Succeed, and the house's darkness would be banished forever. Fail, and Jacob would become part of it. Jacob reading the ritual instructions aloud. His voice shakes as he chants the ancient words. The ritual required him to confront the house's darkness head-on, to force it out of hiding. But summoning it meant giving it power, a risk Jacob had no choice but to take. The room begins to shake. Furniture slides across the floor, and the candles flicker violently. The shadows on the walls stretch and twist, forming a grotesque figure. And then, it appeared, the thing Mallory had summoned, the thing that had claimed Lillian and her family, a figure born of shadows, its form shifting and pulsating with hatred. Jacob freezes as the shadow creature speaks in a deep, guttural voice. "You think you can banish me? You're just another fool." Close-up of Jacob, his fear giving way to determination. He grips a talisman from the ritual kit and continues chanting. Jacob refused to stop. He poured every ounce of courage into the ritual, even as the darkness clawed at him, trying to break his mind. The shadow creature lunges at Jacob, but it's repelled by the chalk circle. It screams, shaking the walls of the house. The ritual was working. The darkness was weakening, but it wasn't going down without a fight. The candles suddenly go out. The room plunges into darkness. Jacob fumbles for his flashlight, but the growling grows closer. The house wasn't just haunted. It was alive, and it was angry. Jacob lights a match, illuminating the shadow creature inches from his face. Its glowing red eyes lock onto him as it hisses, "You'll never leave." Jacob shouts the final words of the ritual. A bright light explodes from the talisman, flooding the room. With a final, desperate push, Jacob completed the ritual. The light grew brighter, burning away the shadows, forcing the creature to retreat. The shadow creature lets out an ear-piercing scream as it dissolves into nothingness. The room grows still, the air heavy with silence. For the first time in decades, the house was quiet. The curse was lifted. The darkness was gone. Jacob sits on the floor, exhausted but alive. The photograph of Lillian's family is now whole, their faces restored. The little girl's ghost appears one last time, smiling before fading away. Lillian was free, and so was Jacob. But the scars of the house would stay with him forever. As Jacob leaves the house, he looks back one last time. The camera lingers on the attic window, where a faint shadow moves. Or so he thought, because some curses never truly die. Jacob stands at the front door of the house, looking over his shoulder one last time before stepping into the rain-soaked night. The house looms behind him, silent. In Chapter 7, Jacob completed the ritual, banishing the darkness that had plagued the house for so long. But was it truly over? Or had he simply removed one evil, only to awaken another? A faint whisper echoes in the wind. "You can't escape me." As Jacob walks away, thinking he's left the horrors behind, he begins to realize something is wrong. The whispers that had haunted him in the house, they followed him. Jacob walking through the empty streets, his footsteps echoing in the night. The whisper grows louder, more urgent. The whispers, soft at first, grew louder with each step. It was as if the very air was filled with their voice, taunting, threatening, and always there. Jacob looks around, visibly unsettled, but sees no one. The camera zooms in on his nervous expression as the whispers grow clearer. It wasn't just in his head. The curse hadn't been lifted. It had only changed form. Jacob arriving at a small diner. He sits at the counter, his hands shaking as he orders a coffee. The whispers continue, though no one else seems to hear them. Even in the safety of the town, the house's curse clung to him. He could feel it. The shadows weren't gone. They had followed him, adapting, seeking out the one thing they could still feed on, his fear. The camera zooms in on Jacob's reflection in the diner window. Behind him, a dark figure is faintly visible, standing just out of focus. But what was this new shadow? Was it the spirit of the girl he saved? Or was it something far worse, something that had been awakened by the ritual? Jacob looks over his shoulder, but the figure vanishes when he turns around. He begins to sweat, his breath quickening. The whispers now spoke his name, soft at first, but growing more insistent. Jacob, Jacob. He was being hunted, not by the house, but by something far more dangerous. Jacob at his apartment later that night. He sits up in bed, the whispers echoing in the darkness. His face is pale as he stares at the ceiling. The darkness was no longer bound to the house. It had claimed him. The more he tried to run, the more it chased him. Suddenly, the bedroom light flickers. A cold breeze sweeps through the room, and the shadow of a figure appears at the foot of his bed. This wasn't just a haunting. It was a final test. The house had wanted Jacob, and it wouldn't let him go. Not now, not ever. Jacob jumps out of bed and runs to the door, but the handle won't budge. He pounds on the door in panic as the figure steps closer, its eyes glowing red. There was no escape. Not from the house. Not from the curse. The final whisper was the last thing Jacob would ever hear. "You are mine." The screen goes black, leaving only the sound of Jacob's frantic breathing. A final, blood-curdling scream echoes through the darkness. In the end, some rooms are never truly forgotten. Some curses never truly die. Jacob had escaped the curse of the house, but the house had not let go of him. The camera slowly zooms in on Jacob's face as a faint whisper calls his name from the shadows. Though he had left, the whispers had followed him, haunting him in the quietest moments. But this time, Jacob's desperation for peace led him to make a decision he would soon regret. Jacob packing a bag. He looks around his apartment one last time, as if he's preparing for something big. He thought he could outrun the curse. He thought moving away would set him free. But deep down, Jacob knew the truth. There was only one way to truly escape. Jacob stands in front of the old house, his face pale, eyes filled with dread and determination. The house seems still, but there's something wrong about it. The house called him back. Its doors, once locked, now stood open. And Jacob, drawn by an invisible force, knew this was where it all had to end. Jacob walking toward the house, the wind howling around him. The door creaks open as he steps inside. The silence inside was suffocating. The house seemed empty, but Jacob knew better. The darkness had never left. It had simply been waiting for him to return. Jacob walks cautiously through the house. As he passes the hallway, the camera focuses on the photograph of Lillian's family hanging crookedly on the wall. The faces in the picture seemed to shift, their eyes following him. As Jacob moved deeper into the house, the walls seemed to close in around him. The house wasn't just alive, it was aware, and it was watching his every step. Suddenly, the room goes cold. Jacob's breath fogs in the air as a whisper echoes through the hall. "Welcome back, Jacob." The house had been waiting for him. It wasn't done yet, and neither was the curse. Jacob entering the forgotten room, the source of the house's evil. The door creaks open, revealing the dark, abandoned space. Jacob knew this was where it all began. The forgotten room, the place where the ritual had been performed, where Mallory had summoned the darkness. And now, it was time to face it once again. The camera slowly pans around the room, the air thick with tension. Jacob stands in the middle, his eyes darting nervously. The house had a hold on him, and now it was trying to drag him back into its depths. The shadows seemed to move closer, their whispers growing louder with every passing second. A sudden gust of wind slams the door shut behind Jacob. He spins around only to see the shadowy figure from before, the creature that had haunted him, standing in the corner of the room. And there it was, the thing he thought he had banished. The creature, the curse, the soul that had been waiting for this moment, waiting for him to return. The shadow figure speaking in a low, mocking voice, "You should have stayed away, Jacob. Now you belong to me." Jacob's heart raced. He had come back to fight, but the house was prepared. And this time, there would be no escape. The figure lunges at Jacob, and he stumbles backward, falling to the ground. The camera focuses on his terrified face as the shadows close in around him. The house had been waiting for him. And now, Jacob would finally understand the true cost of disturbing its peace. The camera pulls back, showing the house standing ominously in the distance. Jacob's screams echo in the air, but no one is around to hear them. Some houses never let go. Some curses never end. The camera pans across the dark, moonlit exterior of the house. Jacob's screams from the previous chapter still echo in the distance, fading away. The house stands eerily silent. In the last chapter, Jacob returned to the house, determined to face the curse head-on. But what he didn't know was that the house had been waiting for him, ready to finish what it had started. The camera zooms in on the darkened window of the forgotten room. A faint figure moves behind the glass, its eyes glowing red. Jacob thought he could end it. He thought confronting the darkness would break the curse for good. But the house had different plans. And now Jacob was trapped in a nightmare that would never end. Inside the forgotten room, the shadowy figure that haunted Jacob in previous chapters now stands before him, its face obscured by darkness. The creature had been waiting for this moment. It wasn't just a curse. It was something far older, far darker. And it had found a way to control Jacob, to make him part of the house. Jacob, pale and trembling, stands with his back to the wall. He's surrounded by shadows, unable to escape. The house wasn't just alive. It was feeding off his fear, growing stronger with every step he took. It had learned from him. It had adapted. And now it was stronger than ever. The whispering grows louder, more frantic. "You can't leave. You're mine now." Jacob tried to fight, tried to break free from the suffocating grip of the house. But the shadows twisted and turned, pulling him deeper into the darkness. Jacob falling to his knees, gasping for air as the shadows surround him. His body trembles as the figure moves closer, its glowing eyes inches from his face. He could feel it. The darkness wasn't just a presence. It was a part of him, and he was powerless to stop it. Suddenly, the door to the forgotten room slams open, and a gust of wind sweeps through the house. The shadows freeze, and then something changed. The house itself seemed to react. A force, unknown and unfamiliar, burst into the room, pushing the darkness back just for a moment. A figure steps into the room, Lillian, the girl who had once been the spirit of the house. Her eyes glow with a strange, otherworldly light. Lillian, the girl whose spirit had been trapped here for so long. But now, she wasn't the same. She was stronger, more powerful than Jacob had ever seen her. Lillian speaks, her voice deep and commanding. "You tried to end it, but you were never meant to. The house will always find a way back." She wasn't here to help. She was here to finish the job. Jacob, in a final act of desperation, reaches for a symbol he found earlier, the same symbol used in the ritual. He presses it into the ground, hoping it will work. Jacob had one chance left. The symbol, the one that had once been part of the ritual. Maybe, just maybe, it could destroy the house's grip on him. The room shakes violently. The air crackles with energy as the figure of the house starts to crack, its walls trembling. The room trembled as Jacob placed the symbol on the ground. The air grew thick, the walls seemed to pulse with power. The house fought back, but Jacob was determined. This time, he wouldn't let it win. The shadows lunge at Jacob, but they stop inches from him as the symbol begins to glow. The darkness screamed as it was pushed back, unable to touch him. But Lillian, she wasn't finished. Lillian's form flickers, her body cracking like glass. She lets out a loud scream, her eyes turning black. The house had been defeated. But at what cost? Jacob had broken the curse, but it had cost him everything. The shadows may have left, but something darker had taken its place. Jacob stumbles out of the room, breathing heavily. But when he looks back, the house has vanished. There's nothing left but the cold, empty night. Some rooms are forgotten for a reason. Some houses never leave you. A black screen and the text, the end. Or is it? Thank you for joining us on this terrifying journey. Don't forget to subscribe, and remember, sometimes the scariest things are the ones that don't stay locked away. Would you like to explore a spin-off? or dive deeper into the story's aftermath.